For centuries, knowledge has been hidden in plain sight across the sands of time. Whispers of lost civilizations, cryptic symbols, and forbidden histories have been erased or concealed. What if the truth was never lost, but hidden? Welcome to Eye of Ancient Mysteries, where the past speaks and the future listens. Sit back, open your mind, and prepare to uncover the untold secrets of our world. Let the journey begin now. There are windows to the past. Do you want to take a look? The question was asked lazily, with a faint smile. But my friend's fingers drummed on the polished table in a rhythm that completely contradicted his expression. I involuntarily glanced at them. You can be a serious man and still care about the beauty of your nails. Ignatiev was undoubtedly a serious cyberneticist, but lately he had started paying attention to his appearance as if constantly under the eye of a film camera. That's how I remembered this moment, the empty coffee cup, the warm glow of the lamp on the polished surface, the relaxed mood of our conversation. Suddenly interrupted by that question, the casual smile and the nervous drumming of well-groomed nails. "Oh," I responded in the same tone. "And where are these windows?" "Let's say right here." With a swift movement, Ignatiev turned toward the shelf, pulled out a folder, and scattered its contents across the floor like a fan. Reproductions of genre paintings and portraits by old masters rustled as they spread across the carpet. "Ah!" I said, disappointed, as everything suddenly became plain and simple. Of course. This stern gentleman in the waistcoat is staring at us straight from the 18th century. And here we see a matchmaker and a sweet girl, unaware of how many generations have gazed upon her thanks to the artist. Is this what you wanted to show me? Not exactly. Come with me? Where? To the lab, of course. Before I could process what was happening, he leaped up with such determination that it cut off any hesitation. Bewildered, I grabbed my coat and followed Ignatiev. The institute was only a 5-minute walk from his home, through a small grove that separated the academic town into residential and research zones. A light drizzle was falling, and swollen raindrops plopped down from the wet branches. Streetlights glowed like tiny mercury fireflies at the intersections. There was no one around, except for a field mouse that scurried onto the road, seemingly contemplating whether to cross right in front of us. As we approached the building, a damp wind blew from the river. The city had been built on a slope, perhaps on the very site where, centuries ago, a fierce battle had raged between a Moscow prince and the Tatars. Now a towering radio telescope rose over the hill, its curved antennas resembling the bows of legendary warriors, as a passing writer had once noted. The buildings obscured them from view. We climbed to the second floor in silence. Ignatiev unlocked the door to the laboratory and switched on a desk lamp. He tossed his wet coat onto a stool. I did the same. Amid the dry scent of metal, rubber, and something else distinctly laboratory, like a faint hint of forest rain lingered. Our coats lay in formless heaps on the stool. The lamp's dim light reflected off control panels, rugged analyzer casings, and the tangled mess of power cables. Various oscillographs, terminals, and other devices loomed in the semi-darkness like murky, watchful eyes. "Make yourself comfortable." Ignatiev cleared his throat, rubbed his hands as if he were shivering, and pulled a stool up to the console. "I just need to set up the equipment." "And what exactly are we going to see?" "What will happen is that we won't be here, as some village priest once liked to say to Pushkin. In reality, don't expect anything too dramatic. These are just the first experiments." He fell silent, performing some delicate operation that I couldn't see from where I sat. The upper part of his face and slicked back hair were faintly reflected in the milky surface of the terminal, like a dreamlike image on the surface of an alien lake. A breeze came through the window. It was still drizzling outside. The barely perceptible hum of electricity filled the space, casting a dim orange glow behind the ventilation slits of a neighboring machine. I shifted my elbow and settled in more comfortably. From the wall calendar, a model in a colorful swimsuit smiled at me. Glossy lifelessness. I thought absently. I wasn't particularly excited, after all. No one invites you to a lab in the middle of the night without a good reason. But at that moment, my strongest impression remained the field mouse confidently strolling through the heart of the scientific district as if it owned the place. Inside the terminal, something let out a deep bass-like hum. Lines of light flickered and dissolved into waves of colorful patches. The sound abruptly cut off. In a single instant, the shapeless blotches rearranged themselves into a recognizable image. My eyebrows involuntarily lifted. I had expected anything but this. On the screen appeared a perfect replica of Girl with Peaches by Serov. It looked as if it were being broadcast live from the Tretiakov Gallery. The computer had recreated every subtle shade and hue with astonishing accuracy, only the luminous quality of the display betraying it as an imitation rather than an oil painting. But surely, this was not the reason I had been dragged here. "Well," Ignatiev turned to me. "Impressive, impressive." I muttered, slightly confused. "The resemblance is incredible. Is this some new method of reproduction?" "Come on, stretch your imagination a little," he chuckled. "Why would we need a copy if we have the original?" I didn't answer. Scientists have a habit of presenting their work to outsiders by asking questions only they can answer. Moments like these make you feel like an idiot, a harmless but sometimes frustrating tradition. My irritation must have shown on my face, but Ignatiev didn't seem to notice. In fact, it amused him. With a magician's flourish, he pulled a pack of cigarettes from his pocket. "What do you think I'm going to do now? Dance a Cossack hopak? No, seriously?" "Well, you're going to light up." "Exactly." With just one of my gestures, you were able to predict a whole series of following actions. Now, another question. Do you often bump into people on a crowded street? Rarely. Why? Because even in that case, you accurately predict the behavior of various strangers. So what conclusion can we draw?
Wait!
Let me guess what you're thinking right now. How long is this guy going to keep confusing me and avoiding the main point? Did I get it right? More or less, I replied reluctantly. Sorry, but everything you're saying sounds quite obvious. A person is born, learns, falls in love, works, and dies. If that's not obvious, but actually that's life. Let's set emotions aside. We've established that a single glance, a gesture, or a sound provides vast information about a person, triggering analog correlation chains in our minds that allow us to construct a probabilistic model for predicting any stranger's behavior. We use this ability constantly, without even noticing. Some people develop it to the level of clairvoyance. Wait a moment, let me read you something. Ignatiev impulsively pulled a book with a brick red cover from his desk drawer. This is a literary study. It contains a memory of Stanislavski about Chekhov.
Listen!
One day a close acquaintance of mine, a very cheerful and lively man, someone perceived in society as somewhat frivolous, came into my dressing room. Anton Pavlovich watched him carefully the whole time and sat there in silence, with a serious expression, not joining our conversation. When the man left, Anton Pavlovich kept coming up to me throughout the evening, asking various questions about him. When I finally started asking why he was so interested, Anton Pavlovich said, "Listen, that man is a suicide." I found this statement ridiculous. A few years later, I was stunned to remember it when I learned that the man had indeed poisoned himself. Ignatiev snapped the book shut with a loud thud. So there you have it. Now, let's talk about our technology. A computer can be called an amplifier of intelligence. All its functions, starting with simple calculations and ending with whatever we desire. Now, let's take a closer look at the girl in the painting. Turning toward the terminal, Ignatiev touched a switch. At first, nothing happened. The screen still glowed evenly. The peaches remained in front of the girl. Her gaze was unchanged, as were the shadows cast by the painter long ago. Then suddenly the shadows shifted. They flickered as if a cloud had passed outside the window, and in an instant her eyes gleamed, like from a forming tear. She blinked. Her fingers, gripping the peach, moved slightly. It felt as though the stool beneath me was turning into a swaying balloon. Swallowing convulsively, I shrank in on myself, trying to maintain at least some sense of equilibrium, physical or mental. Meanwhile, her lips trembled. "Has no one ever turned to stone while posing for you?" she said teasingly. "Strange. To whom?" I shouted, leaning in toward the terminal. "Who is she talking to?" "What kind of question is that?" "To Serov." "Of course." "Let's freeze the moment." The switch clicked dryly. The girl remained as she was, mouth slightly open. Her damp, slightly pleading gaze, at once defiant and faintly smiling, was directed straight at me. Or rather, of course, not at me, at the painter, at the man who had long since passed away, just as she had. But she had just moved, spoken, lived within the space of the terminal. This wasn't like a movie. She was here, right now, truly alive. All it would take was pressing a button for her independent existence to continue. I jerked back, unable to tear my eyes away from her. "No!" The words burst out of me. "How do you know that this voice is hers, that these words are hers?" There was a pause before Ignatiev responded. His profile, frozen in the dim glow of the screen, looked almost ghostly. "The voice, of course, is synthesized by the computer," he said hoarsely, "just like the movements and the words. Inside there's nothing but the movement of electrons. And yet, these are her movements, her words, her voice. We've never heard it before. True? Just as we've never stood on the shore of a Mesozoic sea, yet we know its warmth and salinity as if we had bathed in it. There is a definite connection between a person's appearance and their voice. You don't need to doubt it. It has all been verified. Less than 100 years ago, she spoke exactly like this. Even she wouldn't have been able to recall this moment more accurately. I felt cold shivers crawl down my spine. She's looking as if she can see us. I barely managed to whisper. "No." Ignatiev shook his head. "The past cannot gaze into the future. Only we can see her. A past brought to life. I'm afraid you still don't realize just how alive it is." Do you want to see Serov at that moment? To hear his response. "But he's not in the painting." But there are photographs, sketches, memories of him and the Mamontov family. And even the house where it all happened is still preserved. The computer contains all our knowledge of that time, and the lives of famous people are much easier to model because the most information has been preserved about them. But even the actions of ordinary people, if they were ever touched by the ray of art. "Here, watch!" Ignatiev swiftly turned to the control panel. The screen flickered, went dark, flickered again, and then glowed with a lilac light. Blurred shadows slid across it, disappeared, and then something else appeared, something steady. Birch trees, a female figure walking among them. In the twilight, a pale face faintly glowed. It became clearer. I gasped, "The same girl!" No, not the same. She had grown up, modeling her future fate. Ignatiev commented almost without moving his lips. The computer is randomly searching for another distinct moment in her life. "Ha!" He triumphantly pointed at the scale. 90% probability, and the time, 11 months and 6 days after the painting was created. Interesting. I haven't seen this yet myself. Let's see what our girl was doing then. She wasn't doing anything. She slowed her steps, leaned against the trunk of a birch tree, as if exhausted. Perhaps the evening chill had seeped through her thin dress. She shivered quickly, as if from the cold. Her face looked pale. Or was it just the darkness? This time, the image wasn't quite as sharp. The birch trees were clear, but the expression on her face seemed unfinished. Or was it just agitated? Something about it was changing every second. Hope, impatience, fear. What's happening to her? I asked in an urgent whisper. Where is she? How should I know? Ignatiev whispered back. In the 18th century, Cuvier figured out how to reconstruct the appearance of an entire creature from a single bone. And we're only trying, still just trying quiet. Something happened beyond the screen's mirror. Suddenly, the girl's face lit up. Her entire being leaned forward, dark-haired, full-lipped, trembling with joy. It was an unconscious impulse. As if realizing it, she immediately lowered her gaze, casually leaned back, and looking up at the sky, hastily put on the mask of dreamy calm. Yet she wasn't good at pretending. "I forgot I was looking at a screen!" The dim forest was real. The girl's upturned, bewildered face was real. The thick silence of the summer evening was real. Until suddenly, dry twigs cracked under the footsteps of someone approaching. I saw the outline of a man's shoulder cut into the frame. Before my mind could process it, Ignatieve's hand shot toward the control panel. The terminal went dark. The image, no, the past itself, vanished into it. "No!" Ignatiev cried out, his voice ringing. "It's too intimate," stiffly. I nodded, grabbed my coat, and pulled it on with trembling hands. From the wall calendar, a glossy figure in a colorful swimsuit stared at me. Lifeless, I quickly looked away. Ignatiev silently shut down the equipment. Without exchanging a word, we stepped outside. It was still drizzling. The asphalt gleamed, black and wet. Lights shone from the windows of houses beyond the trees. Raindrops murmured sleepily in the leaves, and the low clouds loomed like a warm, damp featherbed. The lantern's reflection rippled in the puddles. Everything was as usual, as ordinary, cozy, and quiet in the whispering rain, except that behind us, in the building we had left, sat the machine that could open the past wide. "Listen!" I suddenly grabbed Ignatiev's shoulder. "If this is just the beginning, what will it be like in 10, in 100 years? What will it be like?" He glanced at me with a strange smile. "It will be such that our descendants, if they wish, will hear both your question and my answer."